Hi everybody and welcome to another shootout video here at Merriam Pianos. My name is Stu Harrison and in this video we're going to be comparing Roland's mighty RD2000 to Kawai's MP11SE, the dark horse of the industry. These two titans of the stage piano segment are just amazing to play. Really looking forward to this video. We're going to be comparing the action, we're going to be comparing all of those sound modules and the way that it handles the sound, the control interfaces, the ports. Everything that you want to know about these two instruments we are going to try and cover. So thank you so much for stopping by to watch the video. If it's the first time to the channel, please subscribe. We'd really appreciate if you came back and kept watching our videos. And of course, comment throughout the video. Let us know what you thought of it, if we've forgotten anything, or how we can improve future videos. Let's get started on these right away. Thank you so much for watching. So here we are with Roland's RD2000 and Kawai's MP11SE, two absolute beasts of the keyboard business. I'm really super excited to be comparing these two instruments today. I'm a huge fan of the MP11. I'm a huge fan of the RD2000. I actually own and use the Roland RD2000 as my main gigging keyboard, full disclosure. The only reason, or I should say one of the only reasons that I'm doing that is because the MP11 is simply too heavy for me to gig with. I'm often in situations where I'm lugging through, I don't know, hotel lobbies or walking 2 blocks because there's no good parking in front of the club that we're trying to play. And the gigs I do, because most of them are jazz, we can't afford roadies. So it's just me, it's just my shoulder, my back, and my hands. And this beast just proved to be too heavy. So that was one of the actual deciding factors for me when I was picking between these two. And that is the honest truth. A couple of years ago when I was making that call, it was down to these two. So a lot of the impressions I'm giving you are very personal impressions that I was wrestling with at the time I was spending my own bucks. So on the MP11, and the RD2000, one of the biggest differences are the sound engines and the tone offerings on them. The MP11 is the keyboardist's dream if essentially what you're going to be doing is playing acoustic piano or playing Rhodes and using the vast majority of other sounds are coming from external sources. So this is conceived of not as necessarily a standalone unit, but as truly as a central controller for somebody on stage who may be pulling in other VSTs or perhaps has other synths that they're not necessarily going to be triggering on the synth themselves, but they're using the synth as a sound source. This is really set up well to control 4 other external devices through 4 MIDI zones. And then your main beefy sounds, your acoustic piano and electric piano sounds are coming internally from this instrument. So that is the conceived of setup that Kawai was going for. This was done based on a ton of consultation with the professionals that use their gear and were using the original MP8s and MP10s and all those sort of things to further develop this product. You can tell that this is, or I should say another sign that this was what they were thinking, is this huge big flat area back here is designed to put a second keyboard and also to have an area where if you were controlling a mouse or you were in a studio setup, this is nice and flat and very strong. So you can actually put a bit of weight on here and not have to worry about it. So that's really one of the first considerations. Do you need a piano with 1,000 sounds in it because you're not going to be using any sort of an external rig or not going to be using this in conjunction with any other keyboards? If the answer is yes, if you need 200 sounds, 500 sounds, 1,000 sounds, and you just want to plug in and go, this ain't the keyboard for you. You're going to be falling more in love with the RD2000. If on the other hand, you're only going to need an acoustic piano sound and an E-piano sound at an instrument. And for the occasional gig where you're going to want to pull up like a nice structured set list and you're going to be doing presets, but let's say you're using a program like Ableton or Logic or something like that to put together some different structures and you're just going to be flipping through different setups and you only need this to trigger with, this could be perfect. And one of the biggest benefits that the MP11 brings is just how complex and how detailed the sample sets that they have used to achieve this. Now the polyphony on this is 256, which is pretty much saying you're never going to run out of polyphony. But the detail that you get out of the piano engine and the detail you get out of the e-piano engine are just absolutely crazy. When I sat down earlier today to just refresh myself on some of the benefits of the MP11, and one of the first things I did was I just sat down to play the default e-piano tone. I mean, it's just absolutely bonkers how lush and detailed it is just gorgeous. I mean, we're not even playing with any of the settings, and there are quite a few settings to get into. So that's how this thing is structured. Is it's basically set up with three kind of sub-tone generators or modules within it. So you've got an acoustic piano module, an electric piano module, and then they just call it sub, but it's basically pads. So you're talking strings. There is a bass tone that you can get here, but you know, subtones to essentially color your first and your second tones. And it's really easily laid out. At first, if you're not used to the way that Kawai has structured this, if you're used to more of a Yamaha workflow or a Roland workflow, this is going to take a couple of minutes to get it. It's actually a lot closer to the way Nord organizes their boards versus some of the other ones. So if you're a Nord user, the MP11 might actually feel a little more intuitive than if you're coming at it from a Roland or a Yamaha past experience. So you've got 256 note polyphony, and you've got an insane level of control, right, with nice manual controls, real-time controls, and I'm just going to take you through what some of those controls are. So if we are on an e-piano, for example, so that's kind of the default sound. And that's under the time category, and that's the first of three models that you can select from. So this is the second one and the third one. Or of course the reeds. There's your kind of modern DXE sound, and then your electric grand. So if we go back to the very first time sound, within this sound module, you have two separate effects engines that you can turn on, plus an amp simulator, plus a discrete reverb simulator. So you've got four areas in which you can really start to affect the sound, but that's all on top of the sound editing that's immediately on your screen as soon as you select this. So you've got your pan depth, your pan speed, your reverb depth, your touch curb, your key off noise, your amp drive. Everything is right there, which is really awesome. And to bring up the settings for any of those effects and amp sims, you just press and hold it. It's very intuitive, and you immediately get all of the options that are there, which is great. So your effects one is auto pan, classic, depth, speed. So what's kind of cool is when you select from there we go. When you're just selecting from the time 1, 2, and 3, it's giving you a few different control options from within those settings. But if you want to drill down into the nitty-gritty, you can press and hold, and it kind of brings up a second layer of specificity. Really, really cool and easy to use. And then you've got nice, easy fader bars on all three of those, which is also kind of handy. A master volume, pitch bender, modulator, yada, yada, yada. It comes with quite a few setups, because of course you can save any of these settings to a set of preset banks, but there's quite a few that they've preloaded here. So this is piano and strings. And then you've got globe controls like EQ, transpose, your local control off. For any reason you need to have that setting for a specific setup, local control back on. It's also got a reasonably robust onboard recorder, and of course you can get the USB memory in there for playback as well as recording. You've got a panic button for settings, which is kind of nice. It sort of brings you right back to default if you get way down into the rabbit hole and you're like, ah, and you're in the middle of a performance and you just need a reasonable sound that's not going crazy on you. You can hit the panic button at any time. That's always a very handy feature. And actually I've noticed that a lot of pro level keyboards have sort of started giving you the equivalent of a panic button as well. So in terms of a sound setup, you've got high level of control and a super high level of authenticity in these three modules, and then all of the standard MIDI zone controls like key range and specific commands out of there. And what's actually really kind of nice is it comes default with a triple pedal right out of the box, and every one of those three pedals is assignable. So if you don't want it to do the soft pedal, sostenuto, right pedal thing, you can assign the left to be like a program increase. You can assign the middle one to do certain things. So all of that is great. So that's kind of a quick overview of what the Kawai gives in terms of its tone engine and its sound. Really just yeah, lots to love. Now the default concert grand that's loaded in here is their SK concert grand sample set, but with all of the virtual technician controls loaded up with manual knob control. That's really cool because it gives much better real-time control than having to go into an app or a menu. Damper resonance, you can control the stereo width, touch curve is right there, brilliance you can affect. Sort of a roll-off effect, hammer delay, string resonance, fallback noise, stretch tuning, all sorts of fun stuff. Now let's talk about the RD2000, a very different beast in terms of how they've set up the tones, what's offered on board, the control interface. I mean, it's literally on a different planet in terms of how they've conceived of the control and what they're giving to you at your fingertips. Like I said at the beginning, one of the only things that these two have in common, quite frankly, are their intended audience and the price point. Beyond that, they've solved these kinds of design questions in very, very different ways. So on the Roland, you, in a lot of ways, kind of have the same two ideas, where you have these tone modules that are built into the instrument, and they're less obvious than what you have over here because, of course, the control interface implies this modularity. On the Roland, you kind of have to dive in and figure this out a little bit on your own. For example, the acoustic piano is using modeling, and that is unlimited polyphony, and it's giving you like tons of parameters to muck with. And it's only on the acoustic pianos that fit in these two concert and studio settings, and it's only on the ones where it says MD, which means it's telling you that those are the ones that are modeling. As soon as it says SN, that stands for supernatural, and you're out of the modeling. And so the parameters you have to play with on this get dramatically, well, I shouldn't say dramatically less, but it changes. So that's a really important thing to know on the RD2000 is you've got basically two sound engines plus just a standard sample playback that you can then send through the Roland affecting engines. So you've got modeling, which is marked with the MD, then you've got the supernatural, which is Roland's other type of sound engine, which gives you, again, all kinds of amazing parameter controls, and that's marked with the SN. And then you've got like 1,000 sounds in here that doesn't have either one of them, which is kind of just a standard sample playback or PCM synthesis, I think, and you can just send that default sound that doesn't have a lot of parameters, editable parameters within the tone, but then you can still send that through the effects engine. So on the acoustic piano, you can hit Tone Designer, and then you get basically your modeling engine that's giving you damper noise, soundboard resonator, cabinet resonance, key off, duplex, hammer, lid, like all kinds of crazy stuff. And beautiful stuff too. It sounds awesome. And of course there are different models. Bold Beauty, kind of like that one too. So those are the pianos, and then you get into the E-piano stuff. We're done with the modeling. Modeling is only for acoustic piano, but then we've still got the supernatural engine, and so there are components to the sound that are, again, editable. So 1975 Tyne EP, again, if I hit Tone Designer, I get mechanical key-off noise, damper noise, key-off resonance, all kinds of different parameters that are editable there. So basically anything that has that supernatural thing is going to have some kind of a Tone Designer component to it. And it's got an organ simulator on it. This is really cool for anybody who has to use B3 a lot and you don't want to have to lug around all kinds of extra stuff. This puts it on board, and it's a pretty believable simulator. So you hit organ, you get a couple of different presets, that's all well and good, but then hit the Tone Designer, and all of a sudden all of your fader bars become tone bars on like a B3. So you can pull out your 16-foot, your 5 1/3, your 8/4. And so you can really have a ton of fun with this. You've got control over your percussion, 3rd, 2nd, or off, soft or normal, fast or slow percussion. And then, of course, you've got the Leslie speaker, which by default is kind of there, which is handy because on a real B3, of course, you'd have the Leslie switch sort of off to the left here anyway. Now after you get over to strings, pads, bass, all that, now we're out of the supernatural stuff, and there's really not a whole lot to do in the tone designer other than your basic settings, like is it poly or mono, the portamento switch on or off. These are settings that you can actually have on your supernatural sounds, but they're just you know, a little harder to get to in terms of editing. One thing that it's a bit of a pet peeve, but really whatever. I wish that all of the other categories of sounds were accessible other than through the data wheel or the tone or whatever we're calling this silver thing. To get it, you just have to start spinning it, and then you get into this whole other access. So now you're getting all of these different categories: synth pad strings, synth bell pad, voice and choir, scat, acoustic bass, electric bass, synth bass, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, distorted guitar. I mean, there's a ton of categories. And I don't know what the solution is, but I wish there was a better way to access those extra ones, especially for some of the synth stuff. Because of course I know a lot of RD users who would regularly access some of the synth pads, synth leads, and they're kind of just gone. Same with the brass. They're there, but you have to create it as a preset. So there's a comparison of this tone engine. We've got really, in a way, kind of three sound engines. We've got the modeling, we've got the supernatural, and then just kind of straight sample playback. And then you've got faders for creating different layers. Over here, you really just have 3 layers. On this one, you can have 8 layers of sounds. And then you've got an insane amount of control over things like your envelope, your onboard EQ, your delay, your reverb engines, and for the first 4 that you assign, first 4 tones that you assign to a zone, you've got a modulator effects engine, a trem effects engine, and an amp simulator. So actually very similar in terms of what they're offering here, because you've got reverb effects, amp simulator, all of that extra stuff. What the Roland is giving you in addition to that really would be real-time envelope control, your knob control over EQ, although you do have EQ over here, but it's a little less easy to access in a real-time setting, although you certainly can get used to it. And then like 1,000 sounds. Like literally, I don't even know what the exact count is, but we're talking about an insane amount of tones inside the RD2000. So if you're comparing between the two, first of all, you may just have a preference for the Kawai sound or the Roland sound. And if you do, maybe that's enough to make up your mind there. I really like how simple and easy to use the Kawai interface is for the piano and the electric piano. And I also really think they've done a great job with the amp sim. On the Roland, like we said, we've got a crazy level of control over the acoustic piano, the electric piano, the organ, and the clav. All of those things have kind of their own tone designer modules in there. So there you go. There's kind of a good overview of what you're getting from a sound engine and a tone generation standpoint between these two. We're going to dive into the action next, because those are another 2 big talking points that a lot of people are trying to compare and get impressions on between these two. So we're going to throw some specs up on the screen. We'll keep on moving. So let's get into the action now. It's worth noting when you're trying to cover instruments like this, I am invariably going to miss a few points on each. And so by all means, I really appreciate when people jump in with comments and remind other viewers of things that I may have missed, especially when we're covering instruments that are as comprehensive and just as thick as these ones in terms of the detail, in terms of the features. We're just commenting to Lee, who is our camera person, about how hard it is to get all of this crammed into one video and not have it be 2 hours long. So hopefully we're covering the points that you care about, that you want to hear about, but by all means, jump in with other comments if you think I've missed something that other viewers would really appreciate. Let's, like I said, let's get into the action. So I guess the big action story here really is more on the MP11 side, and this is where the weight of this instrument comes. This is equipped with the Grand Feel Action, and the Grand Feel Action by Kawai, which is something that you could find in some of the CA series, is a full wood key length action. That means this wood key that you can see here is essentially an acoustic piano key. It's a solid piece of wood, and it's the same length and it's the same pivot points as what you'd find in an acoustic piano action. And that's one of the reasons it just feels so darn good, and one of the reasons it's so durable. I know there are people who are still using Kawai like MP9500s and some of the very earliest MP series out there that used an earlier version of this action. They're still like wailing on it 20 years later, no problem, used in professional settings. You know, these actions are basically indestructible. It has a bit of a slight texture on the white key, so it doesn't get, you know, sticky if it's really hot out. Same on the black key. It also has escapement, which is kind of a nice thing. Of course, on roads, that's not something you would experience anyway if you were playing the real thing, but if you were on an acoustic piano, you would. So that's kind of a nice thing. It's really nice to play. I mean, as I said at the top of the video, this action is probably the nicest piano action you're going to find in any digital piano, period. Like, it's just, I should say, any portable digital piano, period. The downside is usually the more authentic the action, the heavier the mechanism is. I don't know if that's an absolute rule, but generally you do find that. And so this thing is just a beast. I don't remember what the exact weight of it is. We'll splash it up on the specs at the end of this segment, but I mean, it feels like the thing is 60 pounds. It's heavy. It really is heavy. You don't want to be lugging this around on a regular basis unless you have a wheeled bag, or whether you've got another person, you know, either some sort of a roadie who can help you lug this around. It's a beast. It's really a beast. But if you don't have to move it around a lot, if it's in a studio setting, or if you're lucky enough to have help in setting up for shows, oh my goodness, I mean, what a treat this is to play. Really, really gorgeous, gorgeous action. Over on the Roland, this is the PHA 50. It's got escapement. It's got kind of these wood panels that have been placed on the key to help, I guess, more naturally weight it. It's cushioned on the bottom much differently than some of the other Roland actions. It feels softer when you hit the bottom of the key bed. Some people don't like this at all, who are used to the Roland kind of hitting the bottom with a little more of a thud, and actually causes a bit more of a spring to your hand on the release. So I have heard some people say that they've been fatigued playing this action if it's the first time they've played the action. My advice is don't play this piano softly. That will actually solve the issue because your brain won't be forcing it down so much. So play with the touch curve and don't play with the volumes super, super low. And I do find that that kind of resolves the impression of this being either sluggish or being a little bit too heavy. I've played this instrument now for literally thousands of hours because I'm on this thing a couple of times a week, 2-3 shows per week, and every show is usually a couple hours long. So I'm used to it. I really like it. Genuinely, it's a nice blend of an instrument that's still pretty portable, but is giving you a good touch, a good authentic touch. We've got triple sensors on both. Very, very accurate MIDI output. I have heard from some people that the MIDI output on the Kawai MP11 as well as the VPC-1, which is just a control, there's no tone engine in it at all, is amongst like the most accurate. So I know a lot of people who just use the software synths love the Kawai stuff, but I know quite a few people who are using the RD2000 as a master controller as well. So that's the action. I mean, action more than anything is super subjective. but my advice for sure is if you were trying the Roland, I wouldn't draw any conclusions on the Roland until you've had a chance to play with the touch curve, and my advice is make sure, whether it's through headphones or through an amp, that you're at least kind of at what you'd think of max volume, about 50% or higher of max volume, for you to get the right impression of the weighting and the playability of that action. Let's finish this comparison off by just going through some of the other non-action related, non-tone features, namely the connectivity, some of the ports, some of the accessories that are available for these two. So let's cover the last section, which is just kind of accessories, connectivity, ports, etc., etc. Both of these machines have XLR out. That's a really nice thing because you can't always count on DI boxes, or if you show up to a club, sometimes they'll have the DI, but it's just one DI and you were really hoping to run stereo. And I don't know, all of you giggers out there will understand my pain when I say that it's a good thing to be able to run left and right stereo XLR straight out of here without needing any other gear. It's really good. But for situations where the PA, amp, whatever, won't take the XLR, of course we've got unbalanced, just basically regular 1/4-inch patches out. On the RD2000, you've got your main outs, but you've also got your sub outs. So you've got kind of another assignable set of outputs. And of course, the RD2000, for people who are like really into super geek mode, this can be used as a USB audio interface. So you can actually independently assign those extra outputs if you're going to be running a sequence through, and this is what's going to be outputting the sequence audio into a board. You can just assign it. It's actually very, very handy. So this can still kind of continue to be your home base. Then you've got an expression pedal, assignable foot control there, damper pedal, and then you've got your USB Type A, Type B right there to connect to a computer, or of course to stick a USB key in with either MIDI audio or like a WAV or MP3 audio, which is very easy to call up right there with your USB audio button. There's a pretty funky RD2000 stand that Roland makes for this. You can get a triple pedal that also comes with this. By default, it just comes with a single DP10. That's all I use, but you can hook all sorts of stuff up. And of course, depending on the software that you might be using in conjunction with this, the fact that you've got, what, 8, 9, that's like 17, 18, 9. There's something like 19 or 20 assignable control surfaces on there. Don't know if you'd ever need it, but it's there, and I know definitely there's going to be some situations where you are going to use up a good number of those if you've got some kind of a major crazy live setup going on. If we hop over to the MP11, we also have USB, which can be used to record onto, which is a handy thing. You've got your standard 5-pin MIDI DIN out. You've also got the USB to host, your foot controllers, which is an assignable expression type and foot controller switch. And of course, this comes with the 3-pedal system. It is worth noting that this is actually not set up to be used with a single damper pedal. So if you're watching this video and you're going to go with an MP11, do not throw a single damper switch into a bag, get to a gig, and then realize that the damper is not going to work if you have not brought along the triple pedal. You have to use the triple pedal. Just the way it is. Then we've got our XLR outs we already mentioned. Ground lift built right in, which is great. And then we've got our left and right inputs, which is pretty cool because you've got line-in volume control there, as well as your left and right 1/4-inch outputs. There are not as many kind of Kawai-related accessories for this. You just need to get yourself a really beefy stand and a pretty big bag as well to haul this thing around. As we've mentioned a few times, it's a beast. We've got headphone control on the front, or I should say headphone port on the front of the MP11. Your headphones are on the back of the RD2000. Well, I hope that I have covered enough of this, that this has given you a deeper understanding of these two instruments. But of course, use those comments to mention anything else that you think is relevant to somebody who's looking this. If I've skipped over some sort of critical feature, we want to make sure that people can know about it. But most of all, I hope that whatever you wind up with gives you a ton of musical satisfaction and you have a lot of fun. I mean, these are some of the bigger decisions that we as musicians make out there. We work hard for the money, and when you're dropping $3,000–4,000 on an instrument, you really want it to be satisfying and you want it to do what you were hoping it was going to do. So these kind of videos are really important. I love watching these sorts of videos too. So I hope you've had fun. We're going to throw up one last page of specs for you. Good luck with your shopping, and we'll see you back for more videos down the road. Thanks so much.